Salutationes, I am Rubenus, and today our video over game design revolves around spamming. And now this spamming video is only going to go over AI or robotic spamming, not for human or multiplayer games. And that's because there's different ways to solve those problems and address them and notice them, and so I'm just going to go over AI or robotic spamming. Spamming is when a character does the same attack over and 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 over again. You'll see it pretty clearly in this video when they do the little lunge attack, and sometimes they do it with a little electroshock sound. I really don't know what that is, but it's kind of annoying. But anyway, you'll see it over and over again, and they kind of repeat it ad nauseum or until my death. And you can quickly see also how frustrating it can be when you can't aim. You can't really dodge it because as soon as one starts and ends, the another one is just doing the same thing, and they're just kind of in a cycle of just being sharks rolling around you until you make a mistake and they want your blood really bad. I do want to point out that this video is a little bit disingenuous because Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West both have systems and a bunch of traps and all sorts of different ways that the player can stop, overcome, and prevent the spamming. I just chose not to do it just to show particularly how annoying and kind of obnoxious it can be if it's not done properly and if those systems aren't in the game. Spamming in itself is not always bad, so one thing that Horizon does really well with spamming is maybe not their intention, but I know that the aggression of the enemies increases as you increase the difficulty. So very hard has enemies being very close to you, which means they will lunge more often and they will attack more aggressively and more often, and it kind of goes with spamming, but doing the same attack. I'm not really sure if they planned for that, but their lunge attacks are supposed to be more difficult, and that's because you can't dodge, you can't really aim, and it does make it more difficult. Now, maybe it makes it too difficult or makes it too obnoxious, but that depends on the player, their reaction time, all sorts of different things. But on the easier difficulties, the enemies typically stay away, and they do a lot more ranged attacks, giving you more chance to breathe, to walk away, to go into stealth, and do all sorts of different things, which you can't do on the harder difficulties. So spamming does have its place and time, but needs to be done very well. There are various ways to stop and prevent spamming. One thing is to give players an option for stealth, maybe some kind of smoke bombs, which, Assassin's Creed uses. This game also uses that as well. Being able to block, parry, doing all sorts of those things can help against the spamming, because if they spam the same attack, you can block and parry and maybe do a shield bash or whatever it is. You can knock the enemy from doing what they're doing. However, to stop it at its root value, you actually have to do the programming and the math, which is a whole different thing. So for my game, I'll put it as an example. My enemies typically have 3 to 4 different attacks that they can do depending on the character. I'm going to say 4 just to make it easier on me for the math, then to kind of show exactly what's going on. So they have option A, B, C, and D, and there's a die that rolls in the background from 1 to 1,000. You can make it whatever you want, but the more numbers you have, the greater variety and more probability you have for different attacks. So 1 to 1,000, so you have 1 to 250 is set aside for option A. If it lands on 17, it goes to option A, and therefore 251 to 500 is option B, and then C and D are equally distributed, and so that's 25% chance. Now that's theoretical. The difference between theoretical and practical, or real, is exactly that. Anybody who's ever done that stuff in like 5th or 6th grade math knows when you flip a coin, it's not always heads then tails and heads then tails and heads then tails. Sometimes you get heads 6 times in a row. Statistically, it's an anomaly and shouldn't happen, but it does. And so when you plan things like that in your game where they're equally distributed, you need to make sure that the math is actually split apart and actually balances itself out. So for example, what I did with mine is that you have 4 attacks that are equally distributed, 25%. If it does option A actually gets reduced down to 12.5%. So the end result is that option A is now half as likely to happen as it was, and the other values get what was chopped away. So option A is 12.5%, and the other ones are about 29%. And it does that again. So if it chooses option A for the first attack and the second attack, option A is now at a 6% chance to happen for a 3rd time. You can see where that's very unlikely to happen compared to option B, C, and D, which are now at about 32% chance. And so if it rolls the die and actually hits option B through D, it actually resets the values. And even though that can be annoying because it can do A, B, A, B, A, B, B, A, statistically speaking, it's less likely to happen, but it also does break it up a bit, so they're not spamming the same move over and over again. It's very unlikely to happen that they'll lunge at you, lunge at you, lunge at you, lunge at you, and then sneeze on you wherever stupid attack you decide to do. Another thing you could do is that if the player gets hit, you can have the enemy back off for a second, or you say, oh, option A hit the player, so we're going to stop that attack. We're actually going to lock that away. It gets reduced down to 0% for 3 to 5 seconds. Or if the player runs far enough away and say, like, you know, if they're 20 meters away, that resets the values because now the player's trying to escape and all bets are off. Go get them. Now, for more complex games, obviously for Horizon Zero Dawn, God of War, Kingdom Hearts, all these things that have all sorts of RPG elements, that have bosses, that have ranged attacks, that have distance, it gets a little more complicated because you can't just have 25% chance for a melee attack when the player character is 50 feet away, because it's going to look really dumb on your game if you're watching robots have some sort of fit against a ghost when you can easily just snipe it away. And so you also need to plan away, okay, option A and B are melee, C and D are range. If the player character is, let's say, 50 feet away, only C and D are available, which means that A and B, where you'd be fighting ghosts and kind of just shadow boxing, doesn't really happen, and it makes your game look a little more polished and make more sense because now the enemies actually get a chance to attack the player instead of just taking a beating while mimicking sign language, whatever they want to do. And so if you've never thought about it before, this is where it gets complicated because you can't just have enemies sit there. You have to have the programming to also be like, okay, the player sat there 50 feet away for 10 seconds. We need to move in so that we can do different attacks and mix up the player and actually make it more challenging rather than just, you know, them steamrolling the game. You don't want the player to also be able to spam attacks, and that's a whole different video on itself, which I may get to after this. But really, typically for standard enemies, spamming isn't really the issue. It can be annoying and frustrating, but it's usually not game-breaking. It doesn't really make the player give up on the game, because the player can usually go into stealth, run away, reset the game, reload it, whatever, but bosses are really where it comes into play. Kingdom Hearts is a good example, and I'm gonna, you know, tarnish it a little bit. Kingdom Hearts has a bunch of different moves for bosses. The bosses are very unique, and it's very fun to play. What becomes frustrating is about 50% health, these bosses become super fast, super strong, and in particular, they usually do an ultimate move, which means they're invulnerable. Literally invulnerable. They can't take damage, they can't be knocked out of it, and you have to block and dodge. Now again, this can add some challenge and difficulty to the game, but it also can add frustration if they spam that invulnerable move. And I've played enough Kingdom Hearts to tell you, they will spam that ultimate move, and I've had it happen where they've done it 3 times in a row. They would start it, end it, start it, end it, start it, end it. And you literally don't ever get a chance to attack them, and it's a real problem. For my game, what I decided to do for my bosses, they also have, you know, options E, F, Q, whatever I decide to name them, and those are their ultimate or super attacks. Now, those attacks are really heavily based, and what I decided to do is, again, those are very low chance. So they may be 10%, they might have specific values that once they hit a health value, when the player character is dodging, if the player character is just steamrolling, the fight's only going for 30 seconds, and maybe the player character is about to kill the boss, they do an ultimate move just automatically. But I don't make the boss invulnerable. I allow them to be vulnerable and take damage. They may not get knocked out of it while they're doing the attack, but they can take damage because it's really annoying that you can't just attack the boss. However, what I've also done to kind of balance this is that the player character can actually knock the enemy out of that initial frame. So while they're doing the telegraph of doing the ultimate move, you can actually hit them hard enough or enough times or with a special move or whatever you want to do, and it stops that attack. And what else I've done is actually give them an invisible magic meter. So I never show this in the game, but actually they have a magic meter just like the player character does. They have a special attack juice. And once that juice drains, they can't do those ultimate or super moves anymore. It will recover after some time, but it really helps prevent spamming, not only with the percentage differences, not only with certain parameters, but also if they literally can't do it anymore. Because it gets really annoying, once again, if they just shoot lasers everywhere and you can't dodge them and it takes 50% of your health. It's just not fun if they do that 6 times in a row, especially after you've done this boss battle 4 times and every single time it happens. So hopefully I've given you some ideas on what to look for, on how to prevent it if you're making your own game, as well as just how to analyze games and going, this is what they should have done, or how they could have done something differently. Again, nothing is ever as easy as, they should have just done this, but it is what it is. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified of future videos. If you have any comments about things that you think I got wrong, things that I missed, things that I got right and you want to expand on, or games that have very interesting, bad, or good spamming artifacts in their game, please put them in the comment section below so that we can continue this discourse. But until next time, Wale te omnes.